My name is Cecil. I am the founder and CEO of Revolution, and I am the game director for Beyond a Steel Sky.
I'm Dave Gibbons. I'm a comic book writer and artist, and I've been working on Beyond a Steel Sky with Charles, doing designs, art direction, and some story work.
So Dave and I first met 30 years ago, and I know I don't think we've actually aged at all, have we?
Not at all. We're younger.
No, yeah. I mean, really extraordinary. But when I was working at Activision, and Dave had just written Watchmen, and we were fishing for the rights because it would have been an amazing video game. But anyway, that didn't come off for whatever reason. And then I founded Revolution in 1990, and I went back to Dave, and I kind of thought he would have no interest whatsoever, but asked him if he'd like to get involved with the game that we were writing called Beneath the Steel Sky. And I was absolutely thrilled that he did, and agreed to join as art director, and his scope kind of really mushroomed from there, didn't it? The big change that really happened was that by moving from the retail model to digital distribution, we were able to decide what games we worked on. And Dave and I had been talking for ages and ages about doing a new game. And it just felt like the right game to do. And we were in a position to fund our own prototype.
And over the years, Charles and I kept in touch, and I did various bits and pieces with other games of his. But then the time came that, all the planets were in alignment, and it was feasible that we could do a sequel to Beneath the Steel Sky, which we decided to call Beyond the Steel Sky to really symbolise how far things had come in that time. Again, it was exactly the same thing. I was designing, sending my designs into Charles and the team. This time, of course, sending it on super fast broadband rather than using fax machines or FedEx, and rather than having, small sprites that were collections of pixels, we could have fully 3D rendered figures. And so it became all the joy of the first experience, but with all the wonderful enhancements of modern technology. And we've been working on it for a few years now, but it's been huge fun, and I'm really, really pleased with the way it's turning out.
One of the core objectives in designing this game is that people don't need to have played the original at all. And so one of the many great benefits of working with Dave is that in the introduction comic, he can cram so much exposition in about what happened, much of it from the original game. And what our ambition is, and I think we're achieving it, is that for people who have played the original game, they will see a lot of what they experienced, but from a different perspective. And for people who haven't played the original game, it'll all be new. So hopefully we've got the balance right between the two.
In many ways, that was the function of the comic book, to serve as an introduction, to describe the starting point, to show the incident that kicks the whole thing off, to get to know the characters briefly but hopefully quite tellingly, so that you have an empathy with them later in the game, and then to make it flow seamlessly into the game itself.
When we wrote our original adventures, the first game was called Lure of the Temptress, and it introduced the idea of virtual theatre, and then Beneath the Steel Sky. And in those days, a lot of fans loved the fact that puzzles were a bit obscure. The solutions were obscure. And at Revolution, we really liked the idea that actually the world should be logical. But what's exciting is that our games have actually come through really well, because nowadays people want logic. They want to be able to move forward faster. They want the sense that the narrative is being driven by solving interesting puzzles, but that it moves a lot faster, and that the solutions are not contrived, but are easier to, work out if you think about it cerebrally. That's been very much our philosophy, that we write games that have humour, that are logical, but with dramatic stories. And one of the things that I'm very keen for Beyond a Steel Sky is the sense that the world is very dynamic, which feels much more like, moving towards the RTS, where you have a big open expanse of world. We have arenas, but in those arenas, every character has interesting things to say, and they respond to each other. So we can get a lot more nuance in the writing itself. The key thing is that the adventure used to be just point and click, and now you've got this incredible range of adventures. What Remains of Edith Finch, which came out recently, was the indie darling, along with the Obra Dinn, along with Her Story. Really, really great adventure games that are actually really pushing the boundaries. And that's really inspired us in many ways to take what is a point-and-click adventure and move it into a new realm.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my point of view, it's wonderful that the images can look much closer to the vision that I had in my head, and the whole process of producing them and sharing them is greatly simplified by modern technology. But I think, and hopefully I can say this without bias or without being immodest, I think the thing with the games that Charles and Revolution has done is they're great games, irrespective of what they look like and the surface effect of them. They're games that have stood the test of time. They're great fun to play. They're exciting, they're dramatic, but they've got a lot of humour in them. And I think it's that content really that has kept them at the forefront, and it's the thing that I most enjoy about their games. I think as far as comparing the original Beneath a Steel Sky game and Beyond a Steel Sky, the advance in the way that it looks is absolutely amazing. The first game, the characters were little collections of pixels that were called sprites, which approximated the look and movement of a human body, although only just about. And the backgrounds were drawn out by me in pencil and then painted in with watercolours by another artist called Les Pace, who should be given credit for all the work he did there. With Beyond a Steel Sky, we have fully boned, moving, three-dimensional characters who exist in a three-dimensional landscape. All the artwork is, from my initial rough sketches, is created digitally, shared digitally. We're able to exchange information and versions very, very quickly. I mean, I wouldn't have dreamt back when we were doing Beneath a Steel Sky in the 90s that the technology would have become so advanced. But it is wonderful because the more the technology advances, the more invisible it becomes to the creators, and the more your vision can get through uncompromised to the final player.
In the 2D plane, somebody would walk off a screen and then you didn't know where they were, you didn't know you could follow them, but you may or may not, they might have gone off, they might have done something new. So people were really excited by the principle of it, but we could never really deliver gameplay from it. By moving into 3D, now what we can do is take those core ideas that showed so much potential, or I think they did, and certainly many of our fans did, and actually turn it into what I hope is a great gameplay experience. So in many ways, we bring forward the ideas of the adventure, we bring forward the game world, but in many ways, everything is new. We want to be totally innovative in the way that we tell our stories, but we also want to have the familiarity of people who love the original game.
One of the things that attracted me to collaborate with Charles and his team was the fact that it is essentially storytelling. And although I'm perhaps best known as a comic book artist, I've really only ever wanted to be able to draw well enough to get the story over to people. Adventure games are a really interesting hybrid of being told a story and creating a story.
As video game creators, we can be very proud of the medium. It's different, of course, to film and books, but it is every bit as valid. And to many people, particularly people who are younger, the millennials coming through, they are defining who they are in the way that I define myself through music, and to an extent comic books, and then to an extent video games. But to them, video games come first and foremost. It's an incredible medium, and I'm very proud to be working in it. And I think that it is very, very much equal to the others around it. I think we have nothing to have to apologise for. The original Beneath the Steel Sky was very much a product of its time. In the UK, Margaret Thatcher had just come to power, and I mean, it was an incredible time. It was a very turbulent time. She made the statement that society didn't exist anymore. And
There's no such thing as society.
No such thing as society, which to those of us who are sort of liberal was an appalling thing to say. And it all became about the greed and yuppies. And so, yes, we were very much trying to tell the story of the time. And this is attempting to really capture the sense of what's going on now with social media, with AIs controlling surveillance. So yes, it's very much a product of its time. Dave and I actually were chatting to Terry Gilliam, and Brazil is an absolute inspiration. Brazil was going to be called 1984 and a half because it takes the wonderful 1984 and subverts it and puts humour in. And in the way that was capturing the era from the 50s, Beneath a Steel Sky was very much 1984 brought to the 1990s, and Beyond a Steel Sky is that whole sort of dystopia brought into the 2019-2020.
I think one of the things about Revolution's games is they've always got that particularly disrespectful, satirical view that a lot of British humour has got. And yes, in the early 90s, the targets were quite clear, and it was kind of right versus left. I think things are so much more complicated today with the way society's fragmenting, and I think this is reflected in the game. And also, there's a kind of core question, which is it's got to do with what is happiness in a way? How do you keep people happy? How do you make them happy? Is what they want, what they need? And so it's not a political track by any means, but it's certainly, I think, it has the atmosphere of today. But there are no politics. If people want to know politics, they go and follow politicians on Twitter, or they read the newspapers. Our job is just to have a little fun with the scene we observe around us.
So Beyond a Steel Sky will be coming to Apple Arcade and PC concurrently, and we're also going to be working on the console versions as well. You'll be able to play the game very shortly.